We all know that we're not on track, but what needs to be done to accelerate progress over the next 5 years. And with me are the Speakers of Parliament of Iceland and Ghana, and a high-level representative of the UN, and a young climate activist. I'm going to introduce them in full a little bit later. Let me just give you some housekeeping points. The panel is being recorded, and you can see it later on the IPU YouTube channel. We would really like you to join the conversation and to use hashtags, hashtag 6WCSP and hashtag IPU. And of course, you may have already been there, but on the Salle des Pas Perdus in the UN, there's a great exhibition area. It's extremely important. You will know that the Inter-Parliamentary Union has done a lot of work on advancing women's representation in parliaments. That is stalling, as are women's rights in some countries. So the IPU have now got a campaign going called Achieving Gender Equality Action by Action, and they will be interviewing some of the speakers, no doubt some of the speakers in this room. So please do go and see that. We will be taking questions and comments after our panel discussion, and you will have 2 minutes, and there is a clock in the room. There is also translation. There's translation into French, Spanish, and Arabic. But the panel discussion, I'm pleased to say, is going to be in English. So let me just tell you a little bit more about the speakers. On my right, Thoran Sven Bjarnadottir, first elected to Parliament in 1999, a member of the Social Democratic Alliance and elected Speaker last year. Welcome, Thoran. Albin Sumana Kingsford Bagbin. Albin was sworn in for his second term as Speaker in the Parliament of Ghana, and that was quite an achievement. A member of the National Democratic Congress, and previously held the posts of Minister for Health and Minister for Water Resources, Works and Housing. And at the far end is Susan Brown, who's an Assistant Secretary General and Director of the UNDP's Bureau for External Engagement and Advocacy. Susan has a long track record on advocating for sustainable development and has worked at a senior level for WWF International, the Environment Organization, and Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance. And I'm really pleased to have next to me Georgina Magessa, who's a young climate activist, just had her 11th birthday. And Georgina's from Tanzania, and some of you may recognize her because she spoke at the COP29 in Baku last year. Georgina's an author. She's set up a foundation that's dedicated to a world where every child has access to quality education and can really make a contribution to a sustainable and equitable society. So as you can see, we've got a great panel, and if everybody can take their seats, I think we should start. And Susan, let me start with you. UNDP, lead UN agency for development. So just give us a very brief breakdown. SDGs, we're not on track, but let's start with the positive. Where are we making progress?
Thanks very much, Claire, and great to see you all here. So where we are making progress is with probably around about the 40% mark. We can see quite substantial progress. So extreme poverty has declined. And for those of you who don't know, the Sustainable Development Goals are 17 goals across a number of different areas of need, from jobs growth to protecting the environment to social stability, to conflict prevention, to development partnerships. So extreme poverty has declined since 2015, and at least half of the world benefits from one form of social protection. HIV/AIDS infections have declined by nearly 40%. I'm just reading from the latest figures here. Malaria prevention has avoided 2.2 billion cases and saved 12 million lives. 110 million more children and youth have entered school, and children are going further along in the school journey. And importantly, the gender gap for education is shrinking. Also with infrastructure, many more people, in fact 92% of the world's population has access to electricity. Internet use has grown by 70%. So when we work together, when your foreign ministers and your other ministers go into these global discussions and they take agreements together and they come back at the national level and work through your parliaments, through your legislation, through your budgets to help implement those agreements, we can get huge traction.
So obviously some good news there, but there are some of these sustainable development goals where we're not making great progress. Susan, which ones are a particular concern to you?
Well, I think, climate change is one that we all need to work a lot harder on, and many people are. With UNDP, we're working with all governments on their nationally determined contributions. This is the agreement that your ministers made in Paris in 2015 to come back and at the domestic level reduce or adapt or change energy production so that it's softer energy production and moving away from reliance on fossil fuels. But there's an awful lot more to do. Unfortunately, the climate trajectory is still in the wrong direction. So I would say that that's the really big one that we need to be bolder on.
And we'll talk about that in a bit more because Georgina has been really involved in that. I'm just wondering, what's your assessment of if we don't make progress? You say there's about 40% substantial progress, but that's still 60% of not enough progress. If we don't make progress, what are the sort of risks?
I think if we have populations who don't have access to basic needs, if they don't have access to primary health care, there is an economic cost that happens in the health system later on when health systems are under-resourced for the needs that happen. If people don't have access to jobs, forms of income, if the environment is degraded, and I would say if you want to know about environmental degradation, I just read this excellent book by a well-known author called Georgina, sitting next to me. It describes environmental degradation and what to do very well. If we have an environment that doesn't sustain us, if we have social systems that don't protect people, if we have economic systems that are unjust, then I think we're all clever enough to know where that leads. It leads to more conflict, more desperate people on the move. It leads to an environment that doesn't sustain us and a horrible future, and that's what we need to work together to avoid.
Thorin, what is your assessment of what Susan has said? 40% progress, 60% not progress, and if we don't make progress, well, that's going to be a big risk to peace and security.
Yes, I concur with what Susan has just said, and the description is definitely something that all in this room are aware of. We are not really on track overall, globally. That said, there is progress, and we should welcome the progress. But I think that focus has been taken off trying to achieve the SDGs. And to put it very simply, if we do not educate girls and boys in every country, if they are not allowed to get education, and then I'm not only talking about elementary education, but education until you're an adult, And if we do not basically have a hardcore political policy of achieving equal rights and gender equality, I am afraid sustainable development will just be a dream, because these are the foundations for sustainable development. I know this from my own country, and this is what we have done, especially when it regards education, gender equality, and digital inclusion. These are the foundations of what has to be done. But working on the environment, of course, and I am worried about where we stand when it comes to the environment, because focus has really moved away from climate change, but we see with our own eyes what is happening already, and I am afraid that with the instability in the world and the wars that are going on, politicians have been looking away for this very, very important project. Thank you.
Alban, may I ask for your thoughts on the progress, or perhaps the lack of progress, that we're making on these sustainable development goals, and how much of a concern that is for you?
Clearly, from what we've been told and what we've read from many literature, is not a very good performance. Even though in other countries they've gone very high to over 90%, but in Oceania and Africa it's rather very, very low. And I think that the call we're making today is to move from rhetorics to bold action. And I think as we open the discussion up, we're looking at clearly the challenges. Why are we not performing up to expectation? And clearly, we can identify a few areas where international cooperation, working together, and making sure everybody is on board for us to achieve our goals. But within 5 years, that is quite a tall order. But I believe with commitment, with focus, and working together, we can make much progress within these 5 years.
You don't think that it was over-ambitious, 2030, sir?
I don't think it was over-ambitious. I rather think we lost track. Instead of moving towards peace, security, and development, we are rather investing more in crisis, in wars, in conflicts, and spending more money on defense and security than on the critical pillars of good living. So they were not ambitious, they were attainable. And in fact, as I indicated, a number of continents have achieved quite a great number. And I believe that within the 5 years, they'll be able to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals of 17, and the indicators, as you know, are 105. Quite a mouthful, but I think that the other two, particularly because the lowest, even in North Africa, they've gone as far as 66%. You know, it's only, as I stated, in Africa that there's a bit of decline. In 2023, the figure was around 62, over 62%. It's now declined to about 53 in the average, about 53%, which is really abysmal. But there are some countries that have gone far beyond that to 77%, even in Africa. And so it was not over-ambitious.
So, Georgina, you've heard that people say that they're not on track, but they are attainable, they are achievable. So from your perspective, tell us which of these sustainable development goals, and as Susan said, there's 17, but you don't have to mention all 17, which ones would you really like to see achieved?
I would really like to see SDG number 4, quality education, and SDG number 13, climate action, to be improved, because there's a lot of effects of climate change happening in our world, like heat, floods, droughts, or even more. And education, people normally exclude girls from going to school. They say because boys have to go to school more. But I think that's not fair, because we're all human beings and we all have the same rights to learn, and those two are really stalling. And also life on land, because a lot of people are cutting trees, and I learned this fact that almost 20% of the Amazon's forest produces oxygen for us to breathe. But because a lot of people are cutting so much trees, that it might even lead human beings to extinction or any other animals. So mostly climate action has to be improved to help fight climate change into our world. Things like planting trees, helping to clean beaches, those are the things that are mostly important to improving to our world and help also fight climate change, to help us to have a better and sustainable future for our planet.
Well, I think you've got all of the speakers who will be planting trees and cleaning beaches if they have them in their countries, Georgina. You mentioned that, of course, the impacts of climate change are everywhere. Perhaps you can just give us an idea in your country, in Tanzania. What sort of impacts are we seeing?
In Tanzania, we see a lot of droughts and floods because of the lack of trees. Droughts occurs because of people cutting down trees, and there's no water. Water is scarce in some places in Tanzania, especially in the villages in which girls after school have to go long distance just to go fetch water, in which when they go, they find the water sources dry, which makes them to go walk a farther distance. And droughts occur because of people not taking care of the environment, in which can lead to risage of lakes, rivers, or even the ocean, which can be able to flood a whole village. And
I remember you said, and your mother Mary is in the audience, that you climbed up Kilimanjaro, didn't you? What did you think about the state of Kilimanjaro and that glacier?
Well, the ice on Mount Kilimanjaro is really, really melting because of people burning forests and cutting down trees on Mount Kilimanjaro. I really felt hurt when I once read that UNESCO says that the glaciers are melting fast and could disappear by 2030, in which it is a warning to all of us, because Mount Kilimanjaro is a beauty. It wasn't put there so that the glaciers could melt or people could just play with Mount Kilimanjaro. No, it was put there to show the wonders of the world. But because of climate change nowadays, the ice is melting, trees are being cut, forests are being burnt. Animals are running away on the mountain, some of them because of climate change, in which it's really hard for them to find food or water in the mountain. So mostly that's some of the things that occur in Tanzania. As I said, heat, floods, droughts, and the meltage of the glaciers on Mount Kilimanjaro.
Alban, heat, floods, droughts. You don't have Kilimanjaro in Ghana, but you have other impacts of climate change, I imagine.
Yes, we have Afajatu, which is also a very high mountain, but not like Kilimanjaro. But we have a lot of ridges where the temperature is like in Europe, always cool, calm. But unfortunately, as she stated, there's too much deforestation. There's a lot of environmental pollution and degradation, and it's affected a lot of the attempts to achieve the SDG goals. In fact, in Ghana, we're sure of achieving 7 out of the 17. We've made some great moderate advancement in 8. But clearly, 2 are almost unachievable. SDG 6 and AGC 14, that is clean water and sanitation. We've not made much progress there. And also life below water. That's another tall order there. And these are the areas that have dragged our percentage score to a little bit over 63%, you know, as at December 2024.
Excuse me. Thorin, what about Iceland?
In Iceland, the glaciers of Iceland are melting before our eyes. We see them diminishing. In my lifetime, I have seen a huge change. There is rising sea. There is acidity in the sea around Iceland, which is very, very dangerous to the fishing stock which we live on. The effects are visible. There are effects to flora and fauna, to migratory birds, but we have high living standards. We are a rich country by any stretch, or however we gauge it. So we deal with the changes and we can plan for them, but of course, huge changes in nature and such calamities that could happen in the world will of course affect us too. So we need to take into account not only our situation, which we are prepared to deal with and have the finances to deal with, but we need to take into account how we can assist and develop with other countries projects and basically work on the climate action that we have actually agreed to do. And as you said, we agreed in Paris what we would do. We have not been making a lot of progress, not as much as we should have. And I think that that responsibility is more on the countries who are industrialized and well off than those countries who are less developed and more vulnerable to climate change.
Georgina, you're 11 now. I believe it was 4 years ago, when you were 7, that you decided to become a climate activist. As you've heard, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. But tell us a little bit, why did you get involved? And tell us a little bit about the projects that you help with cleaning the beaches and planting the trees.
I got involved with climate action after I found out that things in our world are becoming scarce, like heats are coming more, which brings lack of oxygen into our world, which causes trees to die or water sources to be dry, droughts, floods, and whatsoever. That's why I've helped plant more than 2,000 trees across different regions in Tanzania, because I believe that trees are just as important. They clean our air, give us shade, protect water bodies, and help fight climate change. And as in beaches, I arrange with my mom safe cleanup campaign along beaches and communities, because I believe that beaches are just as important as trees, because both land and ocean need our care. And I also want my fellow children, those living in the rural areas, those with disabilities like those with low vision or who are blind, to live in a clean and safe environment. And also for the next generations that come after me and after children after me.
And Georgina, you do this with other children, don't you?
Yes.
Yes. So how many other children do you get involved in these activities?
Well, so far we have more than 120 children in which I'm working with, like vulnerable children, those with disabilities, because those are the ones who are mostly forgotten. What we do, we plant trees, we read books together through my foundation, we plant trees together, and we both speak up for change, and we also clean beaches because we children mostly love the beach. We love swimming in the ocean, but nowadays, as I see, the Tanzanian beaches are becoming black, and black, in which you can't even, some of the fishes are dying because of the plastics. And I also read this fact that seals are starting to die because they don't have teeth and they eat a lot of plastics more than fish. And I also remember when we were doing beach cleanup with my fellow children in Tanzania, we open the fish and we find an ice cream wrapper inside of it. We felt so sad because the fish's family just lost a family member, which really hurt us a lot.
So, Susan, we've got lots of initiatives bottom up from the younger generation, people like Georgina in Tanzania. But if we look at climate action, SDG 13, there's SDG 15 on biodiversity, Alban was talking about the other SDG on life below water. I mean, what sort of policies do we need to accelerate progress?
I think what Georgina is so eloquently showing us is that, you know, she talks about working with 120 children. Think of that as 120 voters in the future, and they're going to be voting on the performance of our generation. And you can multiply that by polls which are being taken all over the world. We've done it, the biggest poll with Oxford and UNDP on climate change, and overwhelmingly these polls show that people want action, voters want action, your communities want action, and they need action for their survival. So what can you do at the parliamentary level? I used to work in a parliament. I spent 5 years in Australia working in actually as the advisor to a leader in a minority Senate. So we had a marvellous time because we could actually negotiate to make changes in legislation. And in parliaments, you have all sorts of things you can do. You are setting laws, and one of the things you can do is to set laws at a domestic level that help implement these multilateral agreements like the Sustainable Development Goals. Because these issues cross borders. You can't take a defensive stance at a national level and expect to be free of the consequences of climate change or of ocean pollution, of the economic consequences of how we order and benefit from resources. So you can make laws. You also have budget. And with budget, you know, in there you can tax some things, you can subsidise some things, you can catalyse and stimulate other things. So we ask you, and we work with about 1/3 of parliaments around the world, think through what you can do with your policy architecture and your taxation architecture, all the levers you have to help implement these changes. Also, you have a voice. You have an incredible voice as speakers. And it's not just those on my left or those on my right or order. You have a voice. You can bring other MPs together. You can actually share the knowledge, get to the same level of knowledge. You can take that knowledge back to your community. You can stimulate lower levels of government. You can get in the media. You've got a huge voice in terms of influential people in your countries. You can also have accountability. So whoever spends the budget in your public servants, they have to come before you and justify that they've spent it wisely. And through those those accountability processes, those legislative processes, you have the most enormous influence for change. So I ask you to think of Georgina and her 120 friends and the millions and millions of others who are going to live with what this generation leaves, and use your power in your parliaments for these changes.
Thorin, I imagine in the Icelandic parliament there are policies. You are one of the richest countries in the world. So what is the barrier? Why are you not making enough progress? And where is the biggest challenge that you have on climate action?
Thank you. I'm afraid to admit that the biggest barrier has been political inertia and structural inertia. Some public resistance, not much, but when people are faced with changing their lifestyles that are pretty good, they tend to react in defense of the lifestyle. all of this is the stuff of politics. All of this is something that we have to deal with every day. Of course, we have a national climate policy, and we have carbon pricing, and we support green innovation. But we know where we are lagging behind when it comes to land use, agriculture, when it comes to the waste sector. We need to do better. And I think it's overall, it is the political focus of a positive view on what is possible to do, because all of what we are doing is for ourselves, it's for the future, and it's for the planet. And what politicians need to think about is more than that one term that they were elected to. I think that is the key.
Alban, what about in Ghana? Why is there not as much progress, as you say, on some of these SDGs, particularly life below water, water and sanitation you were mentioning? Are there just too many vested interests amongst industry, or is it inertia? What is it?
Well, what I think the challenge is one of greed, and the way the world is moving at a very fast pace. There seems to be a breakdown. I think that we've forgotten of the history, and multilateralism is giving way to unilateralism. And there's so much greed going on that the smaller, weaker states are being pulled along, not being given space to focus on doing what they could do better. As parliaments, we don't only function, but we have responsibilities, we have duties to perform. So you put the structures in place. It's not just making law. Yes, you make the law, but you must ensure that the law is implemented, and you must follow up after what we call post-legislation scrutiny to make sure that you keep on updating the law. Now, all this demand a lot of resources. And in trying to generate the resources, there's the global shift on some particular areas. And in Ghana, for example, the shift in trying to get minerals had led to too much illegal activities, illegal mining, and that is affecting the environment and ecosystem. That has been a big challenge because you need a lot of financing, and at the global level, there have been a lot of commitments, and those commitments are just in words. And so the financing gap is a big challenge to be able to get in the necessary resources. And that is why discussions such as this will create the opportunity for us to once again refocus our attention on multilateralism, creating new opportunities, and seeing how we could together marshal the necessary resources to be able to implement what we all agreed as the Agenda 2030. In fact, in Africa, we have Agenda 2063, which follows the SDGs, but with an African perspective.
You say that we need to refocus on multilateralism. We all know that that's under threat. Recently, President Trump had a meeting, I think, with 5 West African leaders, not from Ghana, and it was all about minerals. Yes. And we are moving from a world of traditional diplomacy, some say, to commercial diplomacy. But how do we break that shift that there's been? I think President Trump has even said that the Sustainable Development Goals are not in the US interest. So what can African leaders do?
Well, I heard him talk about drill, baby drill, and that is one of the cry of the century. And he definitely, in his discussion with the few African leaders that were, I will call it, summoned by him, emphasized the need for them to open up their natural resources for exploitation. As a leader, a long-time leader in Africa, I'm aware of the approaches we've made to the US on some of these areas, and the response. That is not their interest. The interest is in some 3 areas, which I can only talk at bilateral meetings, not discussions such as this. But that is the area I refer to as the greed, because we all know the consumption of America when it comes to food and other areas, and the focus of America more on that of the readiness to give resources when you're talking about wars and military defense, because they produce a lot. And I wasn't surprised they managed to get even the EU to agree to pay for that supply of equipment to Ukraine. Definitely not they paying, they're creating a market and selling to the market. And so some of these things we have to really look at the multilateral level and make sure that we see each other as in the same boat. You cannot have a strong, prosperous America with the rest of the world being poor. It's not possible. And particularly as America is a mirror of the whole world. And so I'm surprised that we're having that kind of deviation from the global focus of getting all of us together, inclusivity, working together and leaving nobody behind, which, as you stated, seems not to be a concern for the greatest power of our time. And I go there often and draw their attention to the fact that they should not forget, things change. Rome was great. I think Britain was referred to as Great Britain. I don't know today whether it's great. Today it's America. Tomorrow it will be another country.
Thorin, you're nodding your head there. There's a backlash against climate action, and there's a backlash against multilateralism. What can be done against these very strong forces?
Part of what needs to be done is what we are doing here, having a multilateral conversation about what needs to be done. But we need also to do, as my esteemed colleague from Ghana has done, to speak truth to people and power. Both know for ourselves that we cannot campaign for climate change when we then go home and set policies that work against them. And I think that is that if there is a lack of integrity, people see it immediately. Voters see it immediately. So for us, we have to live the life that we ask other people to live. And I think that kind of political courage is very much needed in this conversation, but also in multilateral conversations. And if I may just add, I was listening to a description of how UN80 is progressing, the reform of the United Nations. And I thought, if we manage to reform the United Nations, the multilateral system, in the next 10, 20 years, we have really achieved more in this century than anyone dreamed of. And I think it's very important. It's as important as our national policies. Thank you.
Susan, most probably time to bring you in. I don't know whether you want to say anything about the reform of the UN80, but what there is certainly is a backlash, isn't there, on climate action, climate scepticism, even in European countries. So perhaps I'll ask you 2 questions. How do we move climate change back up the political agenda, and what do we do about this increasing threat to multilateralism?
I mean, certainly there is a backlash, and it's being fueled by a fair bit of ignorance, which is very deliberately shared around. So I think one thing that parliaments can do is really look in terms of cyber security and misinformation. One of the things that more and more governments are coming to UNDP on is to work with them on digital transformation, AI and issues like capabilities and digital misinformation. So there's very much an awareness of what that can do in terms of undermining trust in governments, in science, and so on. I get to talk to ambassadors all day, every day, which is actually quite marvellous, and I really enjoy it. And one of the things I have noticed in the last few months is that as much as the backlash is sort of going, we have, and as much as there has been some scepticism around international solidarity, as much as there's more of a right-wing push towards very defensive internal domestic hunkering down, there are a number of countries now who are frightened by that and who are speaking out really strongly on international solidarity and taking that opportunity whenever they have a voice or a platform to point out why we are all so invested in each other, what the consequences are, and we've heard the consequences today, what the consequences are of not acting, and why we do need to act. And I think that brings me to the solutions. It's not like we're wringing our hands and we don't know. We actually do know a whole lot of the solutions, and we knew them in 2015 and in the 3 years leading up to that. If you take Rio +20, the 4 years leading up to that of the negotiations for the Sustainable Development Goals. And all of your representatives at that time, the 193 or 194 countries that signed on to it, had a choice. They had several years of negotiations. I was at those negotiations. They were monthly negotiations, yearly negotiations, and they got to a point where the targets were all drafted, the goals were drafted, and they got a bit frightened and they thought about stepping back. And there was a really live discussion. Do we go for something that's easily achievable so we're not over-promising and so that we know that we can deliver? Or do we set a set of ambitious targets about the world we want? And they took a very, very deliberate step to set targets for the world we want, a world that's just, a world with environmental sustainability, and a world where the likelihood of conflict was reduced, and a world where there's economic justice. So even though we're only, not quite 40% of the way there, if you look across them all, that's an enormous change in thinking, and those changes take a while to trickle down to populations. I do think there's a lot more awareness growing, and we will be held to account by people of Georgina's generation on this, but the solutions are there. Your technical people know them, your scientists know them, your policy people know them, so let them have a voice and encourage and support them to help you with the changes.
Susan, we've been talking about what parliaments can do. What about the private sector? There's always the question about the private sector, but is there actually substantive progress on working with the private sector, whether that's on climate action or on generally achieving these SDGs?
The private sector were actually involved in the negotiations too. Primarily some of them because they thought they had a lot to lose, so they wanted to keep an eye on it all. But I have seen over the last 10 years since we did this, much more engagement and very genuine engagement from the private sector, partly because they need a licence to operate in the communities in which they work. And whether it's because they're worried about their impact and they're genuinely concerned and they want to reduce waste, or they want to revegetate if they've mined an area, or they want to work in a way which has less of a footprint on the environment, or because they have something to contribute that can really help in terms of renewable technology or water pollution technology or public health. We are seeing more and more of the private sector get engaged. And actually, we have been working with the International Standards Organisation on a new standard for the private sector, which will be finished this year. It's got another very long name. It's called ISO 53001. but it's a management system for sustainability, and that management system will talk to each other around the world. So when companies sign up to that, when people giving investment in companies require that, when boards insist on that, that will be a certification that actually docks in with the Sustainable Development Goals. So it's a very good way for the private sector to be able to see how they're contributing to the SDGs.
And it will prevent greenwashing, which of course many of them are often accused of.
Well, I'd love to think prevent. You can prevent greenwashing because you legislate and you regulate the private sector in your country, and you also need to keep an eye on your private sector people when they're in other countries to make sure that they're operating at best practice levels as well.
Let me ask our two speakers whether their thoughts on what the private sector could do for us, whether it's on climate action or whether we need them to speak up and defend multilateralism. Thorin.
Of course we need the private sector, but I think we should not let private sector companies rule the world. I think we need to own our mandate. We are democratically elected members of parliament in our countries. It is our duty to create a legal framework, like has been said, legislate and regulate. It is also our duty to use the system of levies and taxation and incentives for green innovation, and that includes the taxation of international private companies. You talked about digital transformation. I ask myself every day, who rules the world when it comes to digital transformation? Who rules the world when it comes to social media? Are we allowing things to happen that are beyond our control, or are we afraid to control them? So I do think the private sector, of course, it's very, very important, and there's so much innovation that goes on there, but our mandate is to create a framework that makes sure that it's just and that everyone enjoys the results.
Alban, any final thoughts on that before I'm going to move back to Georgina?
Say that there's nothing wrong with being ambitious and with dreaming big, and therefore in 2015, when we committed ourselves to the SDGs, I think we were having high expectations of an improvement in global governance. That seemed not to have been the situation. We're looking forward to a more safer, more peaceful world. That seems not to be the situation. We're looking at a place of free trade. It looks like we're not having free trade again. You cannot have private sector when you don't have the freedom to do what you want to do, or to sell, or to create markets, you know. And so we, along the way, met some serious global challenges, which is what has led to the, in some cases, like in Africa, I talked about us getting to about 62%, and now there's some retrogression to about 53%, as at the end of December 2024, you know. That is because there are headwinds that are far beyond the control of the continent. And the evidence you just referred to of some of our leaders having a meeting with the President of the United States of America. I go there often, and from here I'm going to the US because we have annually a national conference of state legislatures, and Ghana and Quebec happen to be the international members to that conference. And we always draw their attention to these things. People are not looking at the greater good. People are looking within themselves. And there's so much talk about the individual interests, you know, sovereignty, unilateralism, and the rest that are counter to the vision of the SDGs as we ascribed to in 2015. And so these are some of the challenges, and forums such as these are very good for us to exchange our ideas, and particularly want to encourage colleagues to speak out to power. It's very, very important, because sometimes people don't know the harm they are causing by not treating a neighbor the way they want to be treated, because they will it's a snowball. It will come back to you.
Let me finish the panel discussion before we take your questions and comments and go to Georgina, who's been listening intently. As you've heard, we're in very difficult times. Multilateralism is under threat. Climate action, not much progress. So perhaps your message to parliamentarians, your message to the speakers in the room, to the UN, what do you think they should do so that young people's voices like yours are heard?
I'm not here just as one child, but as the voice of millions. Millions of children who have big dreams, who want to learn, and who care deeply about the future of our planet. We don't want more promises. We want real action. We really demand quality education for every child. That's SDG number 4. But education should not leave anyone behind. I speak especially for children with disabilities, like those who are blind or visually impaired. They deserve the same chance to learn, grow, and to read, just like me. They need trained teachers, talking devices, and most of all, respect. Inclusion is not kindness, it is a right. We also demand urgent climate action. That's SDG number 13. As we, the children, are already feeling the effect of climate change, like the heat makes it harder for us to even play outside. The climate crisis is not in the future, and it is now, and it is ours to live through. That is why we call for something bold, a platform for children at COP, a place where our voices are not just heard, but taken seriously. We don't want to be decorations at global events. No, no, and no. We are not decorations. We want to be decision makers. Children have ideas. We have solutions. We want to sit at the table, not just to be talked about, but to be listened to. So please, don't just listen. Act, include us, and respect us. The world cannot change without its dear children. Asante sana.
Asante sana. I think we have a Speaker of Parliament in the making. Extremely fluent. President. Okay. I don't know whether there's somebody from Tanzania here, but yeah, we're very impressed, Georgina, by you really very clear in your message. Thank you. And I'd like to thank also, of course, the Speaker of Iceland, of Ghana, and Susan, the Assistant Secretary General from the UNDP. Now, I'm looking at the clock because I realise that everybody, or the speakers of Parliament, have a photo opportunity at 1 o'clock that we must not miss. So I'm going to be quite strict on time. I'm going to give the floor to, first of all, the Speakers of Parliament for 2 minutes. And you can see there's a clock in the room, and I will stop you after 2 minutes because we've got quite a lot of people who want to speak. Of course, if you would like to ask a question, please do. And on my list, first of all, I've got Ms. Sahiba Gafarova, the Speaker of the Parliament in Azerbaijan.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair and distinguished colleagues. First of all, I'd like to greet all of you, especially this young lady, Ms. Georgina Magesa. And I'd like to say that I fully agree with her and I support all your wise thoughts. Ladies and gentlemen, it was mentioned here that serious concerns still remain on successful implementation of the SDGs. Past experience shows that comprehensive approach is a necessity, both nationally and internationally. And I'd like to share with you experience of my country, Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan attaches great importance to the 2030 Agenda and has made significant progress in its implementation. 4 voluntary national reviews has already been submitted to the United Nations High-Level Political Forum. Our government has aligned more than 50 state programs, national development plans, and strategies with sustainable development goals. Revival of the liberated Karabakh and Eastern Zangezur regions of our country and realization of the Great Return Program, which means return of IDPs to their homelands, also has an important contribution to the successful implementation of the SDG. Along with ongoing reconstruction works, today more than 50,000 people live and work in these territories. Contamination of the liberated territories with landmines remains the main obstacle to development of these lands. That's why Azerbaijan adopted a national SDG number 18, Mine Action for Safe Return, Settlement, Recovery, Prosperity and Peace. It's also proposed to be established at the United Nations 18th SDG. In May this year, President of the Republic of Azerbaijan, His Excellency Mr. Ilham Aliyev, signed the order on the preparation of the new development strategy for 2027-2030 and the second Great Return Program. The implementation will bring even more success in realization of the SDGs. Distinguished colleagues, timely implementation of the 2030 Agenda also depends on unifying efforts and supporting each other's development. Provision of humanitarian, economic and technical assistance with $330 million to over 140 nations in the last 5 years demonstrates the commitments of Azerbaijan to international cooperations.
Madam Speaker, thank you very much. You're 36 seconds over time. One last sentence, please.
Just 10 seconds. Since 2018, Azerbaijan also provides full higher education scholarships to the students from non-aligned movement and Organization of Islamic Cooperation member countries. Important and tangible achievements of COP29 Azerbaijan last year will undoubtedly have a positive influence on all-round realization of SDG. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And now we have the Speaker of the National Assembly of the Côte d'Ivoire, I understand, who would like to take the floor. The Speaker, or it may be the Vice President, please say who you are, and you have 2 minutes.
Merci, Madame. Je voudrais excuser Monsieur le Président qui est en ce moment dans une rencontre bilatérale. S'agissant de la question des ODD, la Côte d'Ivoire a fait beaucoup de progrès et moi je voulais partager l'optimisme de Monsieur le Président du Ghana. Mais il nous reste 5 ans. Je pense que nous pouvons arriver même jusqu'à 80, mais cela passe par une démarche inclusive, Madame la modératrice. La Côte d'Ivoire a pris beaucoup d'actes. Aujourd'hui, nous sommes sur la couverture maladie universelle pour permettre à tous les habitants de la Côte d'Ivoire d'être couverts et soignés. Beaucoup d'investissements au niveau pour la sécurité alimentaire. Mais si nous, au plan international, avec le multilatéralisme, nous n'arrivons pas au respect des engagements, ça sera des petites atteintes de part et d'autre. Nous allons au COP, Madame, nous discutons, vous voyez les négociations dans les COP, finalement nous nous demandons est-ce que ces rencontres sont juste des retrouvailles ludiques. Il faut, et c'est pour ça que des éléments comme les Nations Unies et l'Union Inter-Parliamentaire doivent agir pour une démarche inclusive et pour le respect des engagements, surtout au niveau international. L'Afrique pollue pour à peine 3%, mais nous subissons de plein fouet les effets du changement climatique. On a adopté le principe du pollueur-payeur. Le principe du pollueur-payeur est passé de côté. Il faut que le multilatéralisme agisse pour le respect des engagements internationaux. Merci, Madame.
Thank you very much, sir, indeed, for those remarks about the importance of multilateralism. I'd now like to give the floor to the Speaker of the National Assembly of Germany, the President of the Federal Council of Germany, let me get this right, Anke Rehlinger.
Meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren, ganz herzlichen Dank für die Gelegenheit, ein paar Worte an Sie zu richten und vielen Dank auch für die ganz wunderbare Diskussion. Nach dem letzten Fortschrittsbericht müssen wir feststellen, dass derzeit nur 20% der gemeinsam formulierten nachhaltigen Entwicklungsziele auf Erfolgskurs sind. Und man wird sicherlich zu Recht, wie eben auch in der Diskussion, die Frage stellen müssen, ist das nicht ernüchternd und haben wir noch die Chance, diese Ziele tatsächlich gemeinsam zu erreichen. Wir haben weltweit mehr Konflikte. Die Hälfte der Menschen glaubt, ihr politisches System reagiere nicht auf ihre Bedürfnisse. Die globale Erwärmung ist mit der Überschreitung des 1,5%-Grad-Ziels an einem kritischen Wendepunkt. Und das wirtschaftliche Wachstum, es bleibt nach wie vor ungleich verteilt. Insofern ja, die Frage in diesem Raum, aber an vielen anderen Orten der Welt zu stellen, geht unser Plan zum Schutz der Erde noch auf? Und müssen wir unsere Ziele ändern oder müssen wir unser Vorgehen ändern? Und ich bin sehr dankbar, dass eben darauf hingewiesen worden ist, dass wir nicht dann, wenn es gerade anfängt, anstrengend zu werden, wir aufhören, diese Anstrengungen gemeinsam zu erbringen, sondern dass wir weiter an der Erreichung unserer Ziele arbeiten wollen. Das ist vielleicht ein bisschen, um ein sportliches Bild zu benutzen, wie bei einem Staffellauf. Auch dort muss jeder an seiner Stelle sich mit einbringen und jeder muss sich aber auch fragen lassen, wo kann ich noch besser werden oder wo können wir vielleicht auch die Schwächen des anderen letztendlich ausgleichen. In Deutschland und in Europa versuchen wir, auch die Auswirkungen unseres Konsum- und Produktionsverhaltens, das man ja durchaus auch kritisch sehen kann, in den Blick zu nehmen. Wir wollen diese Spillover-Effekte systematisch erfassen und wir wollen sie auch verringern. Und wir wollen das Thema zum Beispiel globale Lieferketten, CO2-Grenzausgleichsmechanismen in den Blick nehmen, weil wir wissen, dass das, was wir an der einen Stelle tun, eben auch Auswirkungen an der anderen haben kann und beides zusammengenommen negativ ist mit Blick auf die Erreichung unseres Ziels, unseres gemeinsamen Ziels. Das wird nur funktionieren, wenn wir im Austausch bleiben mit insbesondere auch den Ländern des globalen Südens. Am Ende des Tages bin ich sehr bei dem, was eben auch Georgina gesagt hat, indem sie formuliert hat, wir wollen nicht Versprechungen, sondern wir wollen Taten. In Deutschland haben wir eine Formulierung dafür, es gibt nichts Gutes, außer man tut es. Georgina mit ihren 120 Helferinnen und Helfern tut es. Ich finde, wir sollten es auch weiterhin tun, an den Zielen festhalten, aber auch noch ein Stück weit härter dafür arbeiten als in der Vergangenheit.
Thank you, Madam President, and indeed we are all wanting action and not just promises. Let me now give the floor to the Speaker of the National Assembly of the Republic of Korea, Won-Sik Woo.
네, 지구는 하나밖에 없습니다. 우리 탄자니아 미래 의장님 말씀처럼 지구를 지키는 것은 우리 모두의 의무입니다. 모든 나라가 이 일에 함께 해야 합니다. 그래서 다자주의는 꼭 지켜져야 될 원칙입니다. 나는 지구를 지키는 일, 기후행동에 있어 각국 의회가 의미 있는 역할을 할 수 있다고 생각합니다. 첫째는 구체적인 입법을 통해 기후위기 대응 정책의 실효성을 보장하는 것입니다. 대한민국은 탄소 중립 이행을 법제화한 14번째 나라입니다. 그러나 국민의 환경권을 보장하기에는 부족하다는 헌법재판 결과에 따라 우리 국회는 연도별 감축 목표를 보다 구체화하는 법 개정을 추진 중에 있습니다. 기후재난이 현실화된 지금 필요한 것은 말씀하신 대로 선언적 목표가 아니라 정책의 충실한 이행을 담보할 제도적 장치입니다. 이를 위해서 대한민국 국회에 기후 문제를 종합적으로 다루기 위해 입법권, 예산권이 있는 기후특별위원회를 구성했습니다. 둘째, 의회라는 기관 스스로 기후위기 대응 실천을 강화하는 것입니다. 우리 국회는 정부가 제시한 공공부문 목표보다 10년 빠르게 2035년 탄소 중립을 실현하는 비전을 선포했습니다. 이를 위해 국회 시설의 그린 리모델링과 아리백 달성, 국회 차량의 무공해차 전환, 전자문서 활성화, 다회용 컵 도입, 구체적인 실천 계획을 수립하여 추진 중입니다. 새롭게 건립될 국회의사당 분원도 에너지 제로 건물로 건설할 예정입니다. 상징성 높은 기관인 의회가 탄소 중립을 선도함으로써 기후행동의 전 사회적 확산을 촉진할 수 있다고 믿습니다. 기후위기 대응은 글로벌 협력이 무엇보다 중요합니다. 각국의 경험을 공유하고 국가 간 협력을 증진하는 데 앞으로 의회가 적극적인 역할을 함께 해나갑시다. 감사합니다.
Thank you very much to the Speaker of the National Assembly of the Republic of Korea. I'd now like to give the floor to the President of the Chamber of Deputies of the Republic of Czechia, Markéta Pekarová-Adamová, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, thanks to the panelists, thank you all, but a special applaud to our lady and small lady, Georgina, because I fully agree with her and I think we need such a leadership in the young generation. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development remains a pillar of multilateral cooperation, yet the 10 years since its adoption, we must acknowledge that the agenda is critically falling behind. The reasons are many. Ongoing conflicts, notably the Russian Federation's aggression against Ukraine, the consequences of climate change, and the backsliding of human rights. Despite these challenges, Czechia remains firmly committed to the 2030 Agenda, both at home and abroad. We continue to support the Sustainable Development Goals through multilateral engagement, development cooperation, and systematic national implementation. We believe sustainable development must be built on dialogue with citizens. In this regard, parliaments and we, as parliamentarians, are central. We serve as bridges between people and policy, and we uphold transparent, accountable, and resilient institutions. Civic participation and inclusive decision-making are not just ideals. They are essential for fulfilling the agenda's core promise, to leave no one behind. This means engaging local communities, empowering young people, and partnering with the private sector to unlock innovation and impact. In conclusion, achieving the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030 will require more than determination. It demands our cooperation, our accountability, and above all, our will to act together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I would now like to give the floor to Cuba, the President of the National Assembly of the People's Power, Juan Esteban Lazo Hernández.
Constatar que ninguno de los 17 objetivos será alcanzado a nivel global. La reducción de la pobreza mundial está estancada. Crecen las desigualdades y los efectos del cambio climático se agravan cada año. La deuda externa crece sin cesar. La mayoría de los más desfavorecidos viven en países del sur global. Estos países siguen siendo el último eslabón del desarrollo. Es decisivo que los países desarrollados asuman su responsabilidad en materia de financiación y desarrollo. ¿O es que acaso no destinan miles de millones de dólares a la carrera armamentista? Estos recursos deberían destinarse a sufragar la creciente brecha entre países desarrollados y en desarrollo. Los objetivos de la Agenda 2030 no podrán materializarse si no establecemos un orden económico internacional más justo y equitativo e inclusivo. Por último, pese al cruel e injusto e humano bloqueo de los Estados Unidos contra Cuba, impuesto desde hace 60 años, nuestro país ya ha hecho realidad muchos de los objetivos y desarrolla numerosas acciones de cooperación sur-sur. Para los parlamentarios cubanos continuará siendo una prioridad apoyar la implementación de la Agenda 2030 en nuestro país y promover la cooperación con nuestros hermanos del sur global. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very, very much for your remarks. I'd now like to give the floor to Guinea-Bissau, the Speaker of the People's National Assembly, Domenico Simoes Pereira. Is the speaker from Guinea-Bissau in the room? Est-ce qu'il y a le monsieur de Guinée-Bissau dans la salle? Non? No. Okay. I would then like to go to the chairperson of the Senate of Uzbekistan, Tanzila Narbayeva. Madam, the floor is yours. I don't see the Speaker of Uzbekistan, the chairperson in the room? No? So I'm going to move now to other heads and members of delegation. I'm very aware of the time, and so I would kindly like to ask you if you could keep your remarks to 1 minute, as I have 12 people now who would like to speak. And I'd like to give the floor, first of all, to the first Deputy Speaker of the Seimas in Lithuania, Mr. Juozas Olekas.
Thank you, dear moderator, honorable speakers of the parliament, dear colleagues. I am glad to be able to address this important and relevant topic. Lithuania has committed itself to achieving the 17 SDGs by supporting the implementation of the United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. We all know that when it comes to the 17 SDGs goals, we must first create the condition of their implementation. Peace and security are the essential condition for sustainable development. Therefore, I believe that there are fundamental opportunities for international and inter-parliamentary cooperation towards the implementation of SDGs. For more than 3 years now, we have witnessed the Russian Federation illegal, unprovoked and unjustified military aggression continue to devasting Ukraine. We are all well aware this aggression is depriving Ukraine of the opportunity to achieve all of the SDGs. Ukraine's farmland, which has been affected by heavy shelling and mining, is no longer able to feed millions of people around the world, thereby adding the risk of hunger and poverty. Therefore, we must first ask ourselves what we as parliamentarians are doing and can still do to stop conflicts, particularly Russian aggression. I see our most important mission is to achieve the SND as taking decisive steps to end violation of international law and restore the justice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, First Deputy Speaker. And in fact, the clock will now be changed to 1 minute. You got through before the technology caught up with you. Now let's go to Greece and the Vice President of the Hellenic Parliament, Ioannis Plakiotakis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Fellow speakers, Greece is actively working towards a greener future by integrating innovative policies that promote environmental balance and responsible development. Recent reports highlight advancement in clean energy solutions, with renewable energy resources now accounting for over 35% of the national electricity production. Greece attributes major importance to the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, with the presidency of the government has established since 2022 a special working group on the SDGs. In spite of adversities, Greece remains fully committed to the Agenda of 2030. The 70 goals are impeded in all its major political plans. Conduct strategies are launched, policies are elaborated. Given all the above, it is pointed out that Greece was reported in 2021 as one of only 2 countries in the European Union that managed not to deviate from any of the 17 goals, and finally, likewise, in 2022, remained again in this prestigious cluster, being one of 5 EU countries that not only marked no deviation, but also showed remarkable improvement above the EU average in its performance on 2, 7, 10, and 12 goals. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, sir. I'd now like to give the floor to Cambodia and the Member of the National Assembly, Ms. Lok Keng.
Cambodia is fully committed to achieve the SDG by 2030, which are long-term vision to build a prosperous, socially cohesive, educationally advanced, and culturally vibrant nation. Realizing this requires robust and sustainable international cooperation, opening new pathways for collaboration. SDG highlight the importance of multi-stakeholder partnership involving government, the private sector, and civil society. In other words, we need to enhance public-private people partnership. We need peace and stability without we cannot achieve SDG. In this connection, we are grateful to Malaysia and the US, President Donald Trump, for co-organizing the meeting on 28 July 25 with active participation of China. To implementation the ceasefire effectively, we need international inspection team and observer to closely, fairly monitor and ceasefire agreement. I would like to appeal to all the parliamentarians here to uphold the value of peace and adhere to the UN Charter and hold the government accountable to global commitment and obligation, including the realization of the UN SDGs. Thank you to the Cambodia and Thai troops who fully implement
Madam.
ceasefire.
Thank you. I would now like to give the floor to Algeria, the member of the Council of the Nation, Mr. Amar Deshar.
بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. إن أهداف التنمية المستدامة هي أبرز معالم التعاون الدولي، فلا يمكن تجسيدها بجهود وطنية، بل بتنسيق وتعاون وتضامن دولي كامل قائم على تقاسم المسؤوليات وتبادل المنافع. التعاون الدولي حقق نتائج ضعيفة جدا منذ إطلاق إعلان الألفية في سبتمبر، اعتمادا على التقارير ذات الصلة. 17% فقط من أهداف التنمية المستدامة تم تجسيده وفقا لتقارير المنتدى الاقتصادي العالمي. تعزيز وسائل المنتدى وتنشيط الشراكة العالمية من أجل تحقيق التنمية المستدامة للأسف هو من أكبر الأهداف التي عجزت المنظومة الدولية على بلوغها، فالشركات بصيغتها التقليدية القائمة تراجعت مصداقيتها وفعاليتها في السنوات الأخيرة، وتحولت إلى تعاون انتقائي وإقصائي وغير متكافئ يتسم بالتنافس المحموم على الموارد دون اعتبارات إنسانية وبيئية، وتحول إلى تعاون غير عادل ترفع فيه بعض الدول مؤشرات تنميتها بتأجيج.
Thank you, sir. If you would like to wind up, you've gone over time. In that case, I'll move now to Pakistan and the member of the National Assembly, Mr. Isfanya M. Bandara.
Thank you, respected Chair. Excellencies, colleagues, good morning. It's a privilege to speak at this critical juncture in our journey towards 2030 agenda. In Pakistan, the SDGs enjoy strong national ownership. Pakistan adopted them at its own development agenda through a unanimous resolution of the Parliament in 2016. Since then, we have embedded the goals into national strategies such as Vision 2025 and Udan Pakistan. We have made progress in reducing poverty, maternal and child mortality, improving access to clean water and sanitation. Renewable energy now contributes nearly half of our final energy use. Social programs like BISP, youth and health initiatives, microfinance for women, and e-governance are driving inclusion and empowerment. Financing remains a main constraint. Many developing countries spend more on debt than on basic services. We continue to call for accelerating reform of the international finance architecture, including debt relief and reallocation of SDRs. The people of through legislation, budget oversight, and public engagements, parliaments ensure SDGs alignment and accountability. We must also strengthen partnerships across local government sectors and communities.
Thank you, sir, for your remarks. We've now gone over time. I would now like to ask Qatar, the member of the Shura Council, Mr. Youssef bin Ali Al Qatar, to take the floor.
على الرغم من التقدم المحرز في تحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة، فإن العالم لا يزال بعيدا عن بلوغ هذه الأهداف ضمن الإطار الزمني المحدد، مع بقاء سنوات قليلة فقط حتى عام 2030. وترى دولة قطر أن بلوغ هذه الأهداف يتطلب تعميق التعاون الدولي وتكثيف الجهود التشريعية ووضع سياسات وطنية متناغمة مع الأولويات العالمية، خاصة في ظل التحديات المستجدة التي فرضتها الأزمات الصحية والمناخية والاقتصادية. وقد حرصت دولة قطر على إدماج أهداف التنمية المستدامة في رؤيتها الوطنية 2030 من خلال خطط استراتيجية شملت التعليم والرعاية الصحية وتمكين المرأة وحماية البيئة وتنويع الاقتصاد. كما قدمت قطر مساهمات إنمائية سخية للعديد من الدول والمنظمات الأممية والإنسانية دعما لمسارات التنمية الشاملة في المناطق الأكثر احتياجا. ومن موقعه كمؤسسة تشريعية يطلع مجلس الشورى بدور فاعل في دعم جهود التنمية من خلال دعم جهود التنفيذ للسياسات الوطنية وسن التشريعات التي تسهم في تعزيز التنمية الشاملة وتدعم استدامة الموارد الطبيعية. وفي إطار دعمها المستمر لهذه الأجندة تستعد دولة قطر لاستضافة القمة العالمية الثانية للتنمية الاجتماعية في نوفمبر المقبل. إن نجاح أهداف التنمية المستدامة يتطلب إرادة سياسية جامعة وتعاونا دوليا منفتحا ودورا برلمانيا أكثر التزاما وابتكارا يرتكز على المبادئ المشتركة والعدالة والكرامة الإنسانية. وشكرا.
Thank you very much, sir. I'd now like to give the floor to China, the member of the National People's Congress, Mr. Hao Ping.
Thank you. 中国高度重视2030年议程，提前实现了2030年议程的减贫目标。中国全国人大把促进可持续发展作为工作重点，编纂生态环境法典，制定乡村振兴促进法，开展生态环保法律和相关决定的执法检查，为中国推动绿色低碳、可持续发展作出贡献。中国在实现自身发展的同时，积极支持其他发展中国家落实2030年议程。习近平主席提出全球发展倡议，出发点和落脚点就是加快落实2030年议程。全球100多个国家及联合国在内的多个国际组织积极支持和参与倡议合作，给各国特别是发展中国家人民带来了实实在在的好处。中国全国人大愿与各国议会共同努力，为加快实现2030年议程贡献力量。Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I would now like to give the floor to the member of the Arab Parliament, Mr. Abdikahim Molim Ahmed. I may have pronounced the name so badly that he doesn't recognize himself, but if the member of the Arab Parliament is here, please raise your sign. He's not. In that case, I will move to Oman, the member of the Shura Council, Mr. Mohammed Amour Sultan Al-Mashaiki.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. يسعدني المشاركة حول قضية عالية تمثل حجر الأساس لمستقبل أكثر توازنا وإنصافا، وهي تحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة بحلول عام 2030. فقد شكلت أجندة الأمم المتحدة 2030 خارطة طريق عالية طموحة تهدف إلى القضاء على الفقر وحماية كوكب الأرض وضمان الرخاء والسلام والعدالة للجميع دون استثناء، وحيث أن تحقيق هذه الأهداف يتطلب رؤية استراتيجية شاملة وجهدا جماعيا منسقا وعزيمة صادقة تترجم إلى واقع وخطط تنفيذية مدروسة. لقد أولت حكومة سلطنة عمان بتوجيهات سامية من حضرة صاحب الجلالة السلطان هيثم بن طارق المعظم حفظه الله ورعاه اهتماما بالغا بقضايا التنمية المستدامة، وجعلتها محورا أساسيا في رؤية عمان 2040 التي ترتكز على محور الإنسان والبيئة والاقتصاد والحوكمة. وقد جاء التزام بلادي بالتنمية المستدامة من خلال دمج أهداف التنمية المستدامة في الخطط الوطنية، وعلى رأسها الخطة الخمسية العاشرة 2021-2025. إننا على يقين بأن الاستدامة ليست مجرد هدف، بل نهج حياة ومسؤولية وطنية وأخلاقية تتطلب العمل المستمر والتخطيط السليم والمشاركة المجتمعية. فلنعمل جميعا من أجل بناء مستقبل يضمن للأجيال القادمة أرضا آمنة واقتصادا مزدهرا ومجتمعا متماسكا لا يقصى فيه أحد. شكرا.
Thank you for that call to action at the end. I would now like to give the floor to the Russian Federation, the Deputy Speaker of the Federation Council of the Federal Assembly, Mr. Konstantin Kosachev. it may be that we have a no-show there. So the final person will be the Vice President of Indonesia, Mr. Mardani Ali Sera.
Thank you very much, Chair. Indonesia fully committed support the SDGs because we believe that SDGs is one of the best track to improve our capacity. But we also believe that how can you govern your country if you cannot govern your family? So that's why we believe we have to solve our homework. Last May, we have a PUIC, Parliament of Islamic Countries. We put the theme, good governance and strong institutions. We also implement openness, meaningful participation, budget oversight, and digitization in our parliament. We believe that we are not the only one. We have to collaborate with people, public, private partnership. So we have to make a movement, not only a program. Thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much for your words there. I would like to give the floor, I think Kenya would like to have 1 minute, if you'd like to introduce yourself too. Thank you.
Thank you. Mine is SDG 3 about health. As you know, HIV and AIDS is really a pandemic that is killing many of African continent people. And with the stakeholders withdrawing their support, many of our people are dying of HIV and AIDS. And I wonder how IPU will meet the 2030 agenda of finishing, providing, ensuring healthy lives and promote well-being of all in our continent. So I really need that checked up and given an answer to this, because our people in Africa are suffering. And we cannot pretend to be among the IPU when we are suffering and people are withdrawing funding when it is available to them. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's been well noted by the people who work for the Inter-Parliamentary Union in the room. And I'm going to give the floor last to the Vice President of the Assembly of Mauritania. Please, sir, you have 1 minute.
Something to add into that, please, if you don't mind.
شكرا السيدة الرئيسة. تمثل التنمية المستدامة اليوم تحدياً عالمياً مشتركاً يتطلب تعاوناً دولياً منفتحاً وتضامناً فعالاً يعترف بحق كل الشعوب في تحقيق الازدهار ضمن بيئة مستقرة وآمنة. إننا في موريتانيا نؤمن بأن التنمية ليست ممكنة إلا من خلال الشراكة وتبادل التجارب والاستثمار في الإنسان والموارد على نحو يحقق التوازن بين متطلبات الحاضر وحقوق الأجيال القادمة. وفي هذا السياق تمتلك موريتانيا فرصا واعدة في مجالات استراتيجية: الطاقة، التعدين، الصيد. ونحن منفتحون على شراكات دولية عادلة تسهم في تنمية هذه القطاعات وتعود بالنفع على شعبنا. إننا نؤمن أن للبرلمانات دورا حيويا في هذا المسار، وهو ما نسعى للعب دور فعال فيه. إن موريتانيا رغم التحديات تواصل سعيها لتحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة وتدعو إلى نظام تعاون دولي أكثر عدالة وشمولية. شكرا.
Thank you very much, and shukran. And I can see people are already leaving for the photo opportunity. So I would just like to say that from what we've heard, you have all of the solutions in your hands. In fact, Susan has a whole list of them that she'll be very gladly share with you. I'm just going to give the last word to Georgina, as I think we have a minute or so before 1 o'clock. Georgina, the final word.
Thank you very much for attending to come to this panel discussion. And I hope that all of you can get out of the room and have something to share with other people from your country, because we really need to have climate action into our planet, because our planet is being destroyed by climate change. And thank you very much for coming, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you.
There we are. I think I'm out of a job. She could be a conference moderator as well. Thank you to our speakers of Iceland, of Ghana, to Susan Brown of the UNDP, and of course to Georgina Margessa, our climate activist. Bon appétit, have a good lunch and a great photo for those who are going to have one. Thank you.